What if your government doesn't control your money at all? What if the real power over your wealth hides behind closed doors, in rooms you'll never enter, decided by people you never chose? Every flag waves with pride, every leader speaks of sovereignty, and every citizen believes their nation prints and protects its own currency. But what if that belief is an illusion? What if the money you work for, the money you save, the money that defines your freedom, is governed not by presidents or parliaments, but by central bankers and global institutions that answer to no election, no constitution, and no one but themselves? The illusion of control. We grow up believing nations rule themselves, that presidents, parliaments, and prime ministers shape prosperity. We assume the money in our wallets is sovereign, created by our governments, backed by our countries, and accountable to us. We're told central banks are simply part of the state, guardians of stability, defenders of the economy. We imagine economics as a science, not a struggle for power. But trust is not knowledge, and stability is not freedom. Few people ever stop to ask, who created the Federal Reserve? Why was the Bank of England born in secrecy? Why does the Bank for International Settlements sit above national law? And why do unelected bankers hold more power than presidents? We rarely question the system, because the system has taught us not to. History, however, remembers what citizens forget. Cracks in the illusion. For most of our lives, we've lived inside a story, one that says governments rule, central banks protect, and money is a tool of the people. But illusions are strongest right before they break. At first, the cracks are small. A sudden rate hike here, a market crash there, a bailout no one voted for, a quiet meeting behind closed doors. Each time the same excuse. It's temporary. It's technical. It's for stability. But stability for whom? Every emergency measure seems to save the same few, the institutions that caused the problem in the first place. Each rescue comes with new rules, new debts, new dependencies. We're told the system is too complex to question, too important to change, too fragile to touch. So we don't. History whispers a quieter truth. Every financial order, no matter how mighty, carries the seeds of its own collapse. And when faith finally falters, the cracks that once seemed invisible widen overnight. That's when the illusion ends and the story of control begins. The origins of control. The modern financial world wasn't born in daylight. It was forged in desperation. In 1694, England was drowning in war debt. The crown couldn't pay its soldiers, couldn't feed its fleets, and couldn't borrow another shilling. Then came a lifeline, not from the people, but from a private group of wealthy lenders. They offered salvation, but at a price. Their proposal was simple and revolutionary. They would create an institution to lend money to the crown, and in return, they would receive the exclusive right to issue the nation's currency. And so, the Bank of England was born. The public saw recovery, their nation funded, their king restored, their economy revived. But beneath that hope, power quietly shifted. Control over money, and therefore control over the state itself, moved from elected rulers to private creditors. It wasn't patriotism that built modern banking. It was profit, disguised as rescue. And centuries later, it would repeat again, across the Atlantic. The American experiment. By the early 1900s, America was booming but unstable. Markets surged and crashed. Banks rose and fell. Then, in 1910, a secret meeting took place. A small group of bankers and politicians slipped away to Jekyll Island, Georgia. No press, no public record, no oversight. Behind closed doors, they drafted a plan for a central bank, one that would stabilize the economy, manage credit, and prevent future panics. 3 years later, in 1913, the Federal Reserve was born. Americans were told it was a government institution. In reality, its stock was owned by private banks. Its meetings were secret, its decisions independent of Congress and voters. When crises struck, the Great Depression, the 2008 crash, the 2020 pandemic, the same pattern repeated. The Fed printed trillions to save the system, but the rescue always flowed upward, to banks, funds, and insiders. Ordinary citizens paid through inflation, taxation, and lost trust. Each crisis strengthened those who controlled money. Each bailout reinforced dependency. And yet, few question the system, because when the fire burns, the hands that hold the water decide who gets saved. The empire without a flag. When the Great Depression left nations staggering, a new layer of control emerged. In 1930, the Bank for International Settlements, BIS, was created. Its official mission? Manage Germany's war reparations. Its true legacy? A global authority invisible to ordinary citizens. The BIS became a central bank for central banks. It sits in Basel, Switzerland, in a fortress of glass and steel. Its officials carry diplomatic immunity. Its vaults are beyond the reach of any nation. No taxes, no oversight, no transparency. A financial Vatican. A sovereign entity whose members are not nations but central bankers themselves. When currencies collapse, it rearranges the ashes. When crises strike, it expands influence. And thus, true monetary power no longer resides within nations, but above them. This is the empire without a flag, an invisible power that governs not with armies or laws, but with debt, liquidity, and silence. The cycle of dependency. Every generation is told, this time is different, but history whispers, it never is. Governments spend, debts rise, crises strike. Central banks step in as saviors. Each rescue tightens the chain. Every bailout deepens dependence. Every temporary measure becomes permanent. What looks like stability is really consolidation. We're told these institutions serve the people, but they serve the debt. When nations borrow their own money from central banks, they become borrowers, not masters. Credit replaces productivity. Wealth is recycled into obligation. Each crisis postpones reckoning, and each postponement makes the next storm larger. This is not monetary policy. This is dependency, institutionalized and sold as salvation. The cycle of dependency. Every generation is told, this time is different, but history whispers, it never is. Governments spend, debts rise, crises strike. Central banks step in as saviors. Each rescue tightens the chain. Every bailout deepens dependence. Every temporary measure becomes permanent. What looks like stability is really consolidation. We're told these institutions serve the people, but they serve the debt. When nations borrow their own money from central banks, they become borrowers, not masters. Credit replaces productivity. Wealth is recycled into obligation. Each crisis postpones reckoning, and each postponement makes the next storm larger. This is not monetary policy. This is dependency, institutionalized and sold as salvation.
The moment of recognition. The illusion finally shatters when you see the truth. Money is not created by governments. It is created as debt by institutions that hold the right to issue it. Every dollar, every euro, every pound is borrowed into existence. Every citizen is born into obligation. When you deposit your paycheck, you are not saving wealth. You are holding a promise from a private banking system. And promises, like empires, are only as strong as the trust that sustains them. When that trust breaks, when inflation erodes your savings, when banks freeze accounts, when policy adjustments turn money into numbers on a screen, the story ends and reality begins. That is when the cracks become visible. By then, the foundation has already shifted beneath you.
Lessons from history's whisperers. History does not lie. It waits for someone to listen. Economists like Friedman warned, inflation is not accident, it is policy. Leaders like Jefferson cautioned, private banks are more dangerous than armies. Whistleblowers across ages whisper the same truth. The hand that prints money rules the world. The pattern repeats. Governments need funding. Central banks rescue with debt. Citizens pay through inflation and taxation. Power flows upward. Nations depend on credit, not productivity. Control money, and you control decisions. Control credit, and you control governments. control currency, and you control civilization. But knowledge without action is despair. Doubt without direction achieves nothing. When the mask slips. Every empire tells you its currency is safe. Every central bank promises stability. Every generation believes this time is different. But history does not forgive complacency. Bank of England. Born in crisis, expanded through empire, insulated from oversight. Federal Reserve. Secretive, privately owned, controlling the world's reserve currency. BIS. Immune to taxes, national law, and political oversight. They say they fight inflation, but they create the cycles that cause it. They say they serve the people, but they serve financial institutions first. And if this system is fragile, why hasn't it collapsed? Because power doesn't fall, it transitions. Every crash concentrates control further. Chaos does not weaken these institutions, it strengthens those who design the response. The awakening and the path forward. This story is not about fear, it is about awakening. Those who see early, prepare early. Survivors were rarely the ones who trusted the system most, they were the ones who understood it first. Protection comes from real ownership, assets outside paper promises. Diversification, beyond borders, beyond banks. Understanding money as power, not paper. Skills that create value beyond currency. Education in financial sovereignty. Assets outside centralized control, digital and physical. Most importantly, know the system so it cannot own you. Central banks built a world where trust flows upward and responsibility flows downward. Power belongs to those who prepare, not those who print. Conclusion. Holding currency or holding sovereignty? The question isn't whether central banks hold power. They do. The question is whether you remain passive or rise as someone who stands outside the system when it trembles. Money is not freedom. Control over money is. Empires of banking will one day shift, as all empires do, and the few who prepare will shape what rises next. Ask yourself, are you holding currency, or are you holding sovereignty? History has shown those who understand and act are never the ones left behind.